I'm Takayuki Watanabe from Yamaha, Japan. So I'm taking care of the acoustic enhancement system, which is called Active Field Control AFC system. So I'm working in Yamaha for more than 30 years.
Hello, I'm François Desfarges from France, Paris, Nexo. I'm head of engineering support at Nexo. Engineering support department is at Nexo to monitor, support, serve all our customers, our projects. And in the case of this venue here, as you can see in the background, we have a big PA system. So I'm here just to confirm in the new environment that everything is running smooth together with Watanabe-san.
Hello, my name is Hideo Miyazaki from Yamaha Corporation Japan. I'm leading a special audio system group which is taking care of AFC project and also acoustic design of the concert hall and the theater. And I joined Yamaha more than 20 years ago. No, 90 years ago. Yes, 90 years ago. About 30 or 40 years ago, we started the business about acoustical design. So at that time, mainly in Japan, we have been involved into the acoustical design of concert hall or music spaces. We got some requirements from the client. The client want to do some chorus performances, but also they want to do some speech performances. Speech is really important for a church project, right? So for speech, of course, intelligibility is very important. But for chorus music, of course, reverberation time is very important. So those requirements are really contradictory. So to solve that contradictory requirements, we invented this special technology. It's called AFC. So using AFC, we can expand the feasibility of the sound spaces. So for example, we can using AFC, we can create the sound spaces for the concert hall performances, also chorus performances, or even with AFC, we can do some extraordinary acoustical spaces.
Hideo-san mentioned about the contradiction that there is in acoustics when we go into different applications. In the case of intelligibility and choir, we know that symphonic orchestra need typically, important reverberation time, which also contradicts eventually with intelligibility. Opera needs less, and probably the most exaggerated cases live sound, basically sound reinforcement, amplified music, because in such case, what we want to have is acoustic which is as damped as possible, so that we don't have, excess reverberation in the low frequency. There was not this possibility, so venues were very limited in the way they would program, because basically the acoustics of the venue would condition what music program would be there. And now with AFC, we can work on low reverberation time hypothesis, which is perfectly suitable for amplified music. And we can then increase to an opera register, to a symphonic register. So it's definitely about greatly expanding the music repertoire that can be played inside a venue.
There's a physical way of the acoustics. So, for example, moving ceiling. So controlling the moving ceiling, it can control the room volume. So we can control the reverberation time, and we can easily recognize the drapes on the wall. But those are much expensive way than electric method.
In the past, Hideo-san, did you design venues with variable acoustics?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's actually for acoustical designer, such kind of a mechanical system is very easy to promote to the client, right? So, but of course, it's really not cost effective.
My experience there is that in most of the venues I've been into, it is so time-consuming. Yes, such a hassle to change the acoustic configuration that usually they just fix one and they don't change it afterwards. Yes. Maybe the only case that I know where they keep on changing all the time is the ESPRO at the IRCAM in Paris. But this is an experimental place. So this is just to play with the acoustics. But how long does it take to change an AFC3 setup?
Just 2 seconds.
Okay.
We use electrical equipment, a microphone, a processor, amplifier, and speakers. AFC using that feedback loops actively. So we compensate the appropriate level to keep the system stability.
We have to focus on the natural sound. The most important thing for AFC, such kind of electric system, is natural sound with active period control. So active means actively we are controlling the feedback loops between the microphones and the speakers.
When I hear about you're the architectural acoustic engineer, yes, but by the end, room acoustics is also about a feedback loop, because we have the sound coming from the stage, yes, going to the walls, eventually to the audience, and then back to the musicians. If the musicians don't get the feedback, yes, from what they're playing, then it's very difficult for them. So by the end, I think it's very similar. Maybe the only difference, and this is the tricky part, is that with electroacoustics we can have a gain which is more than one, which is we can have gain leading to feedback, which is the only difference basically with room acoustics, where the gain is necessarily below 1.
Recently, we connected network technology, which is called Dante. We can provide quite precise high sound quality.
On hundreds of channels.
Yeah, correct. That is a quite important point. Yeah, that is a quite important. General large auditorium have several shortcomings. One is large windows, or there large space of the under balcony area. For example, large windows cannot get the sufficient lateral reflections. On the under balcony area, the audience cannot get the sufficient overhead reflections. Anyway, those are less reflective area. So AFC can support that part and supply appropriate reflections to compensate that fault.
Mainly there are two purposes. One is reverberation, and another is early reflections. And both are very, very important for the acoustic in space, sound space. And for reverberation time, of course, the sound naturality is very important. But at first, we don't have the strong power of the devices. So at that time, the AFC can enhance only for reverberation time. But eventually, the technology is have been developed, and we can create the very natural sound using the high digital technologies. So AFC need to create the direct sound from the speaker to the audience. Sound naturality is very important. So we can add the early reflection part to the reverberation time part. Using the both of the system, we can create any kinds of the sound spaces.
It's fine, and maybe the last point also is for what is very important in a venue, is the ability for the musicians to properly hear themselves.
And the stage area is also very close to the audience, stage players. So the sound naturality from the direct sound from the speakers are also very important.
A kind of large auditoriums, mostly main purpose is lecture, but in that case the room is high absorptive, so we need expand the usage lecture to the music, acoustical music. For acoustical music, stage acoustics is more important. In that speech lecture auditorium, on the stage, there is a number of absorptive curtains. So acoustic enhancement like AFC can provide sufficient acoustics for musicians.
in general, PA system is used for speech performances. We had the idea of so-called voice lift. Voice lift means their hands-free PA. So without PA, using AFC, you can speak. You can create the very intelligible sound.
And you can bring that sound all the way down to the venue.
Exactly.
Even though it's absorptive without microphone. So it's, I'm unsure, but it's probably a 6 dB gain, 3 to 6 dB gain for the front rows, but probably a lot more at the back.
Exactly.
Depends on the size, of course.
Of course, compared to general PS system, the increased voice is not sufficient, I guess. But still effective, I think. Yes.
We can look, according to what Watanabe-san has described, for the various functions of AFC3. When we're talking about reverberation, yes, we're talking about very diffuse sound. It's the late part, basically. And for diffuse sound, we will typically look at omnidirectional sources. We do not necessarily need lots of power. There is one thing we don't want, is to localize. So typically these are going to be ceiling mount speakers, and the same will go for the under balcony. When I'm under my balcony, I don't want to hear the sound coming from here. The speakers have to generate also a diffuse sound, which is why the omni characteristic of the source is very important. When we go on early reflections, it is slightly different, because the early reflections are usually in front of the proscenium and on the sides of the venue, and in that case, early reflection has a very different characteristic type, I would say. We're not talking about diffuse type. It can be diffused, but not like the reverberation. Yes, but early reflections will vary depending on the source location. They will vary depending on the listener location. So in that case, we need definitely a little bit more directivity control. So we have to emulate, to some extent, some kind of side diffuser panels, right? In a way. So for that, we need a little bit more power, because the amplitude of the signal is typically higher. Yes. So this is typically an application case for, I would say, PS8. You see, we're not highly directive, but we're definitely more directive than the sources which are being used for reverberation. Then, when we talk about what we call the stage shell or the electronic shell, yes, we have speakers neighboring microphones, very close, very, very close. And typically, a stage height can be up to 15 meters. And we have numerous speakers and numerous microphones. Microphones on stage can be up to 16, 24. So we have to play with high directivity. So this time we need eventually more power than for early reflections. Yes, and we also need more directivity, which is, in such case, ID24 is definitely very suitable, because ID24 has a nice 40 degree by 120 degree pattern. So the 120 degree is absolutely fine to cover laterally, and the 40 degree is nice to cover this way. Depending on the music repertoire and so on, Watanabe-san can program so that the shell actually works as an acoustic shell, yes, from the sound which is picked up here and sent there, because it's about, the violins hearing the double bass, right? It's about the brass instruments hearing, the flauts, the strings. When we increase the room acoustics, yes, typically in acoustics which are around 1 second reverberation time, and which in venues which are used for amplified music, the most critical part is the very low frequency, which we have to damp very strongly. And when we go to symphonic repertoire, it's the opposite. We want to have a much higher reverberation time in the low frequency that we have in the mid frequencies. So the LS18s, the subwoofers which are there, which are being used on early reflections, yes, are here to provide this warmth in the low frequency content. We're talking about below 200, 150, and all the way down. As manufacturer, from what I see in the AFC tuning, yes, the better we do our job on the speaker side, the easiest it is for you on your side.
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
What's the typical count for channels and speakers in an AFC3 installation for a venue which is 1 to 2,000 seats? What's the typical channel and speaker count?
Depends on the size of the venue, but around more than 50 to up to 200, speakers. Yeah, when we install our system in the traditional opera house, we have to install our equipment invisible. So audience cannot recognize the speakers, but the sound is quite natural and good.
The AFC is different from general PA system, right? So we believe the AFCs are part of architecture.
I think that in architectural acoustics, the way we see influences the way we listen. So if you hear a sound and you don't see the sources, your perception is that it is natural. Yes. And if you listen to sound and you actually see the speaker and the sound coming from it, your perception is that that sound is not natural.
We apply several decay components so to set the appropriate delay time for each equipment. And also we have to consider about the sound image and the reflections component.
So Yamaha has a lot of technology, a lot of skill, and a lot of gears related to music. And so Yamaha can offer everything related to sound spaces. For example, for theater, we can provide PA systems, electric systems, and AFC systems.
Instruments?
Of course, music instruments. Of course, we can't forget that. Of course, music instruments, and also architecture acoustic design. Right? So, as a Yamaha, we are really happy to provide everything, total solutions for music theaters, performance theaters.
What you can see with the AFC3 in spaces is that the direction basically is going into merging acoustics together with electroacoustics. Okay? And I believe this is what AFC3 is about. Basically, it's about progressively improving acoustic through electroacoustic means. So that's clearly, I think, that's going to be the trend for the next 20, 30 years, thanks to additional DSP capability, thanks to more and more sophisticated equipment. And it is a very passionate, I would say, story on the speaker side. Because on the speaker side, it forces us to also consider, what is the best speaker to best serve, all these algorithms and all this implementation. Yes. So very challenging, but because it's challenging, it's fascinating.